Thank you, Josh. I'm going to try to utilize the podium. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Steve Gibson. I am an OSPR environmental scientist. I work out of the Los Alamitos office. We are responsible for the Long Beach and LA County harbors, some of the largest container ship ports in the United States and in the world, actually. I just learned that Long Beach will be the 5th largest container ship port in the world when they complete the new upgrades they're doing there. So we get a lot of traffic, the container ships, tankers, things like that, refineries in the harbor. So there is potential, great potential for spills of all sizes there. Get a lot of traffic. So that's our main area of concern, and all the sensitive areas around it that 21 million Southern California people utilize every day. So today I'm going to talk to you about the resources at risk subject. Okay, so in this module, we'll be talking about sort of the context of resource at risk in oil spills. And then we'll talk about the overview of identification tools. Important one, Chris just talked to you guys about the ESI maps. And as you see, I also want to mention before I forget, as we talk about this, one of the most important things that we rely on is other agencies and people with knowledge, local knowledge, to help us out in a spill, because no information is complete, so there will always be gaps, and we rely heavily on local knowledge. We're going to talk about response considerations regarding resource at risk, and that's basically. Okay, so in the context of spill response, when we're talking about resources at risk, they can be several kinds of resources at risk. My main concern, one of my main concerns is environmental resource at risk in the spill, but we also have cultural, historical resources, economic resources, but the main subject here we're talking about environmental resources. Okay, so the resource at risk in the context of spill response is a technical specialist. It's located in the environmental unit of the ICS system in the planning section. It's usually conducted by OSPR environmental scientists, responsible party representatives, federal environmental scientists, state, local agency representatives. And we identify the resource at risk to set the site priorities for protection during spills. We rely on a number of identification tools, and we're just going to kind of skim over those. Okay, so there's many kinds of environmental resource at risk. Habitats are an important resource at risk because they provide habitat for many of California's resources, wildlife and fish. Some of the habitats that are at risk during spills are wetlands, beaches, estuaries, and mudflats. A lot of birds are at risk from impacts from oil spills. We've got seabirds, shorebirds, waterfowl. A lot of marine mammals also that can be impacted, such as elephant seals and sea otters. Lots of invertebrates can be impacted from oil spills also, as you saw in your environmental toxicology presentation. As in fish, we have grunion we were just talking about. Naturalist fish such as steelhead will utilize estuaries for juveniles and for spawning, for foraging. There are a few reptiles and amphibians such as the California red-legged frog that will use estuaries. Okay, so here's an example of a rocky coast. It was on the ESI map there. And rocky coasts are important because they They support kelp forests, giant kelp forests, which are important for many invertebrates and for fish, for shelter, and for urchins and sea otters utilize them. The rocky shorelines are utilized by bird colonies for roosting, nesting, shelter. Also, the rocky intertidal zone is used by many fish and invertebrates, and supports some of our valuable fisheries in California. Another important habitat is sand beaches. You get a lot of birds that use the sand beaches, such as the western snowy plover and the California least tern are both federally and state listed species. And they use the beaches to nest on, which makes them very vulnerable to impacts from oil. And they also forage in the shoreline and just offshore, so they're easily impacted by floating oil. Tidal inlets and estuaries are very important. This is a picture of the Seal Beach Naval Weapons Base and Anaheim Bay National Wildlife Refuge, and Huntington Beach there to the right. Just a second. Estuaries occur all along the Pacific coast. They include San Francisco Bay and the Tijuana Estuary, which is the largest Southern California estuary. They provide sources of food and shelter to many marine, freshwater, and terrestrial animals. Some of the important species are eelgrass, which provides attachment structure for juvenile fish, fish larvae, invertebrates, shelter for juvenile fish and herring and things like that. Bird?
Go back to that slide.
Sure.
I just thought it was worthwhile pointing out that the rectangular island in the marsh there, we're talking about resources at risk. That rectangular island, up, to the left, or that's NASA Island. The other one that's jutting out.
Here or here?
Here.
Have a hard time seeing a rectangle up there.
This.
Oh, okay, yeah.
This island there, that's an oil production facility. So, and as far as I'm aware, it's an active oil production.
Still active, yes. Right in the middle of the.
Right in the middle of Seal Beach National Wildlife
Refuge, yes. Okay, so they're very, very important, and I think 90% of Southern California estuaries have been filled in or removed, encroached upon by development. Okay, so we're on to the birds. We have shorebirds, like the California least tern on the top left there, and the western snowy plover on the right, that you can see actually sitting on a nest on the beach. Easily impacted by oil spills, and then also, and they're both federally and state listed. And then on the lower left, we have surf scoters and grebes. Those are seabirds. Also, common murre, pelicans, cormorants. There's many, and waterfowl, that birds that use the ocean for foraging, rafting, and are easily susceptible to floating oil impacts. Also, seabird colonies are easily impacted by oil spills. This is a picture of the elegant tern colony in Bolsa Chica Ecological Reserve. It's the largest in the United States. They have over 20,000 birds there during the breeding season, all crammed together, so that oil spill can easily impact a large portion of those animals. Marine mammals, this is a 2.5-month-old northern elephant seal. Not as susceptible as the sea otter. Sea otter is very easily impacted by oil spills. They rely on their fur for thermal regulation, so when you impact their fur, they can lose body heat, and it definitely affects their ability to survive. And then also they will often clean their fur and ingest the materials. We'll jump to the sea otter there. Okay, so some invertebrates, there are, this is a picture of a black abalone. It's not a commercial fishery, but it is an endangered species. And it is in the rocky intertidal zone, and boils can easily impact them as the tide goes up and down. Also, pismo clams, razor clams, many invertebrate fisheries in California, very valuable. There's several fish that can be impacted by oil spills. Steelhead, as I mentioned, is one. There's tidewater goby. They use the estuaries, brackish water along the coastline, and these are often shallow and can easily be impacted by oil spills. Here's a picture of the California red-legged frog you might find in the estuary, and if oil should get into the estuary, semi-permeable membrane of their skin could easily be affected by the toxics. Okay, so for identification of resource at risk, usually OSPR environmental scientists will at least assist in that position in an oil spill, help identify the resource at risk, the responsible party, federal, state, and local agencies, and anybody else who has knowledge of the area will be consulted as available. As I mentioned, we are in the environmental unit, operating as a technical specialist. Also important branch is the wildlife branch for resource at risk, who provide on-the-ground reconnaissance, which is very valuable. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then their role is to identify the resource at risk and establish resource protection priorities. So here's an example of the ICS structure. We've got the planning section and environmental unit, we'd be right down here, and then operations section, the wildlife branch is going to be on the ground. Here is an example of some OSPR environmental scientists hard at work as resource at risk technical specialists. Deep in thought with a stack of tools there in front of them. Okay, so here's some of the tools. The ESI maps we just talked about. The area contingency plan, I'll go over that a little bit, how that is laid out to our advantage. The wildlife reconnaissance I talked about from the ops section. Rare Find and the California Natural Diversity Database. The California Wildlife Habitat Relationship Database. Cultural Historical Resource Specialist. Site-specific resources such as literature and local experts. And the ICS Form 232, once you identify all the resources at risk, you put them on the 232, it's very valuable to put the priorities, when you can see the big picture of what you're trying to defend. Pick priorities for the most important sites and get it up on the wall so ops can see it and everybody else can see it and know what their main focus of effort is going to be. Okay, so I won't spend too much time on this, but here's the same ESI map that Chris was showing us. Our area contingency plan is the result of hard work from the Coast Guard, industry folks, and OSPR folks who accumulate all this information, ESI maps and on-the-ground experience, things like that. They all go into the area contingency plan, which is updated every 3 years. We're in the middle of our update, so 2014 we should be producing the latest version of the area contingency plan. It has sensitive site summaries. I'll show you some examples. It has site response strategies, site diagrams, economic, cultural, and archaeological concerns. So here is the area I am stationed is Los Angeles, Long Beach area contingency plan. It has LA counties, and Orange County has the islands off the coast there. Here's a picture of all of San Diego County, which is area contingency plan 6, which Chris is stationed in. And if you look on here, there is some 40 sensitive sites already identified in the area contingency plan, and each of them is ranked with a priority of how sensitive it is. So here's an example of a sensitive site in San Diego County. It's the Tijuana River. It gives a site description. It gives some of your special and seasonal resources of concern, and then it gives the primary resource of concern. So you have endangered birds, clapper rails in the marsh, you have lagoon, salt marsh, very important sensitive habitats. And then down here you see we have key contacts. So this identifies for initial responders who they might want to contact to get any additional information that might not be current in the ACP, or who might have resources that they are responsible for. Here we have the site strategy page. Concerns and responses, concerns and advice to responders, sorry. You have some hazards and restrictions, and then you also talk about the site strategies, protection strategies. It gives a list of what techniques you'll use initially to protect the area. So in this case, it says to construct a 300-foot sand berm closure with underflow at the river mouth. Certain seasons that might not be possible, some seasons it might be possible, but the goal in this case is to, in the case of berm, would be to close off the access of the oiled water if it was offshore, so it doesn't flow into your estuary. So that's one way to protect a resource at risk, such as this. It gives you the type of booms they suggest to use, and all these are tested throughout the process to improve any techniques before any sort of spill occurs. Okay, so here's the diagram. Here's where you would build your berm across the inlet. If the oil was out here, it would stop it from going in there. It would protect the resources that have been identified in here. These also are booms. Or that is a berm. That's a berm, not a boom. That is a boom. Okay. So wildlife reconnaissance is important to resource at risk. Oftentimes we have an aerial survey unit. They'll go straight up in the air when notified of a spill and get eyes on the water or the land to identify where the spill is at. And but in this case, this is an aerial survey unit for wildlife. So they would be spotting bird rafts, birds, concentrations, maybe up over open water, or any marine mammals that they might see up there, and any information that they could give the responders to help protect those resources. You can go by boat, do aerial surveys, you can get people out on the beach and identify if there are nesting birds or seal rookeries or anything like that that might be sensitive. Okay, so I think we talked about the database here, but the best thing about this database is it is updated continually. So it might be updated weekly with information, monthly. It makes it a little different value than the ESI maps, which might not be updated very often. So this would be some of your most up-to-date information. Lots of information in there. This is an example from a spill that happened up by Lake Tahoe in the springtime. Excuse me, it was all under snow. So when we did use the GIS layer and looked up the area for sensitive species, we got a list of several species there, and in the path of where the spill was going, so it helps set a priority for how we're going to approach containing and cleaning up the spill. So the California Wildlife Habitat Relationship Database, also an important tool. You can look up the habitats that you might identify on your ESI maps or on the ground. come up and you can sort of predict what species of animals or plants that you might find in the area. It'll also identify, it can be identified by using different habitat types. You can use location, or you can search by species. Very valuable tool. Here's an example of sort of one query for an area. They went by species, so a list of species that might be in the area. Cultural and historical resources. Under the National Contingency Plan, there's programmatic agreement for protection under emergency response. The area contingency plans include some general information on consideration of cultural and historical resources during OSPR responses, but there's no site-specific information there. That's kept with the trustees for that information. We don't want to make any of that sensitive information public. So we have contacts in the ACP for the California Historical Resources Information System database, and those are held by the State Historic Preservation Officer. And if you contact them, tell them the area that you think is going to be impacted, they can search their CRIS database and they'll get back to you for what areas are most sensitive for them, or any sensitive areas in that case. Okay, so site-specific resources, as I said, we rely heavily on local experts that are most up to date with sensitive sites, sensitive resources, such as the EPA personnel just informed us of 2 new snowy plover nesting sites that we were unaware of. That stuff is really important. They're current with current land management practices, which could alter the way it's represented in the ACP. There may be management issues. There may be transferring water in ponds, drying ponds out. So things change all the time in some of these habitats. Okay, so for response considerations, listed species tend to have the highest priority because they're already impacted. We want to try to protect them as much as possible. Sensitive habitats and sensitive sites identified, hopefully already in the ACP, will have a high priority based on the way we've weighted them. Cultural and historical resources will be very important also. Here's a picture of the California clapper rail. It's in a salt marsh, and it is highly impacted by oil if it should get into the salt marsh. Salt marsh is a difficult type of habitat to clean, and if you know the clapper rail are there, you might use extra precautions such as putting down plywood to walk on when accessing areas, try to minimize the damage to their habitat. Also, sensitive sites such as this salt marsh, you would definitely want to put a high priority of keeping the oil out. Once the oil is in there, it's very difficult to get out, and there are many species that nest in there. If it's on the Pacific flyway, a lot of birds will use it as stopover, and a lot of invertebrates grow in there, and so it is one of the highest, most productive type of habitats in the world. Here's an example of glass shards or pottery shards or something like that. If you knew that they were there, you would probably try to use your protection strategy to protect the ground, and you wouldn't want to dig a trench through there to contain any oil or anything like that. You want to be sensitive to those cultural historic sites. Okay, and then ultimately you come up with once you identified as many important resources at risk as you can, you're going to want to rank them. This is just an example of a spill drill where somebody in the bay put together, based on the trajectory, the most important resources at risk and set priorities. So you have priority 1, containment. You're going to want to get every asset that you can there first. Get down here, priority 9, Angel Island. It's on a sand beach, which is a great place to clean up the oil once it gets there. And then ultimately, in the ICS structure, this form right here is your final result, And it might change hourly, daily, depending on how the trajectory of the spill is. But you're going to put a site number here. You're going to give it a priority, and then you're going to put some basic information there that will help responders. And then you're going to get that up on the wall so ops can look at that and know where they put their assets first in order to protect those sensitive sites and resources that we've identified. Okay, so in summary, in spill response, resource at risk is a technical specialist that helps to identify the most important resources and set a priority for those to be protected first. I give you an overview of a lot of these tools we've mentioned, and some of the response considerations, and then a couple of case studies, but that's just a very brief and shallow overview of resource at risk.